Welcome back, everyone, to Neuroalchemy, where science meets soul and where healing is understood as a multidimensional, intuitive, and deeply embodied journey. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Young. Here on Neuroalchemy, we slow things down, we listen to the body, and we define every term as if you're hearing it for the very first time. Because clarity creates safety, and safety opens the door to more healing possibilities. Today's conversation includes themes related to trauma, nervous system dysregulation, illness, and personal healing experiences. You're invited to listen in a way that feels grounding and supportive for you. You can pause, you can step away. Nothing here requires pushing or effort. Everyone, here's your invitation to take a deep breath. Your body is welcome here. Today, I'm joined by Tami Lysher, and I'm truly honored to welcome her to Neuroalchemy. Tami is a trauma-informed movement educator, intuitive guide, and the creator of Move Into Calm, a neuroscience-based program that helps parents and children regulate their nervous system through breath and movement. She brings more than 35 years of experience in early childhood education and movement, along her own profound healing journey as both a trauma survivor and a 19-year breast cancer survivor. What stands out about Tami's work is the way she embodies resilience. She doesn't just teach regulation, you guys, she lives it. Her work carries a deep respect for the body's intelligence, the wisdom of movement, and the body's natural capacity to heal when safety is restored. Tami, I'm really glad you're here. Welcome to Neuroalchemy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sarah, for having me.
Before we move into the conversation, I like to begin by helping us arrive. Tami, how are you arriving today? This can be physically, emotionally, mentally, energetically, or a little bit of all of the above since we live multidimensionally.
I'm actually feeling energetic and excited.
I love that. That is a great way to be. And everyone out there, there's no right way, there's no wrong way to arrive here. However, you're showing up today is enough. Before we step into your story, Tami, I'd love to help orient our listeners. Tami, you work with concepts that feel intuitive but are also grounded in neuroscience. So let's define a few ideas gently and clearly.
Okay.
First, trauma informed movement. What does that mean in practice? And how is it different from traditional exercise or movement programs?
So, trauma informed movement is I'm just going to call it a concept that I use when I work with more adults. I teach Pilates as well. And so I have a Pilates studio. And so it's allowing people to soften into their bodies and allow their breath to help guide them. And if something needs to be released, kind of like somatics, I guess is a good. So for those of you that don't know about somatics, it's just allowing your body to relax into, because so oftentimes when I get people that come to me, they're tight and tense. So this is allowing people to just come and just be as they are without being like they've got to fix themselves. And it's just really honoring where they are with their body and their breath. And so but the trauma piece for me is like looking through a lens, and I don't need to know your story. I just need to know, and I don't even need to know if they've had trauma. Usually it shows up in so many different ways. It could be breath, it could be tenseness in their shoulders, it could be pelvis, it could even be in their voice. So it's just honoring where they are and not needing to fix anything. It's just allowing people to just be and be present with them.
Next, nervous system regulation. How do you explain that to parents and children in everyday accessible language?
I usually start by talking about our bodies, our breath, and the nervous system kind of go hand in hand together. If something, it might be a long conversation, but for our conversation purposes, I think that giving people practical things and understanding of like examples, especially if I'm talking to like a parent, like holding your breath. When you get upset, do you hold your breath? And it's just automatic. We don't even realize. So our body does things and we don't even realize it. We might shrug our shoulders up by our ears, or we might hold our breath, or our voice might go up. So it's all of these things I mean, we have no control over them. And sometimes it's subconsciously, and something might even happen that you don't even remember about, and your body responds in a way that could be, I'm going to use the word trigger, but I don't want to trigger it. So that could be something that happened when you were young, 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 young. So, but just trying to teach everybody that our bodies are guided by our breath and our uh, um the nervous system, and it impacts every aspect of how we move, how we interact with people. So
And finally, move into calm. What is it? And how does it help the body and nervous system learn over time?
okay, so moving to calm is actually something that has been like, I've been creating it because I worked with children for many, many years, and I saw, and we'll talk about but the concept behind it has been coming for a long time. So move into calm is it's a I'm going to use it's a framework. It's not a curriculum, so it's a framework, and it's based on, like, when I worked individually with children and families, it's based individually on the child's needs. So for example, because we want the child to move from being stressed out and tense body to relaxed. And so it might be teaching or just observing, how does the child breathe? How does the child move? How does the child interact, like parent child interactions together? So it's really looking at and encompassing the whole picture, not just the movement pieces of it. But I use movement to help get the child to move. So we might use things like, in the beginning, things that the child likes, and giving them choices, and agency is just so important for the work that I do, because a lot of times the children don't want to do, they maybe they're stubborn and they don't want to respond to like directions. So giving them choices is really, really important. But the first and foremost thing is establishing safety for me with the child and me with the family. So if they don't know me, and creating a relationship between, so it's everything I do is relationship based. So, and then teaching the parents the skills, that like the stuff that I do, so they can take it home. So I'm here to guide the family, and I actually have created a course that they can do without coming to the studio, that could help them have an understanding of what the nervous system is all about. And then I give them, so it's got three components. There's a learn, a move, and then an explore component to it. But I would say that from a definition, it's a framework to help parents understanding that moving the body helps to regulate the body, and it moves the, like, motion, or the emotions need motion to help process the whole entire part of it. So
Thank you for grounding that for us. I'd love to begin with the heart of your work. What inspired you to create Move into Calm?
I think that it was always there, but I went and did, so the formation of it, like framework for it, has been evolving. So I was doing it, an event for 600 parents and children, and they were broken up into smaller groups, like, let's just say 25 to 50 parents and children, and they were coming into a room where I was at. We would do 15 to 20 minutes. It was more like yoga, it was breath work, but the children were all under 5. And this particular little girl, I don't know her name, I can just tell you what happened. She was probably 9 months old, and she crawled across the room and sat in my lap. And now everybody said, "Isn't that cute?" But because of the education piece in me, I was like, "My gosh," like the attachment and understanding, like how it was just so profound. And that little girl was really the spark for me that said, "You need to do this, Tammy, and you need to do it on a bigger scale, and you need to," and like I said, I don't know her name. I have pictures of her sitting in my lap, and that's about all. So that's what started to inspire me. But I also think that my own journey and having an understanding of my own nervous system, but seeing how trauma impacts children, especially living here in Michigan. And I can talk about, like, I worked in downtown Flint during the water crisis, and then we had COVID. And so there was just kind of all these things. And I worked with families that lived in poverty. And these are all on the back end of the work that I do. It's just through observations. And it was just something that I've always been passionate about. My dissertation for my master's degree years ago was in like movement, like children's movement. So, and what contributed to like the lack of movement. And at that point, it was like I would see delays in movement, delays in speech, delays with, the interaction, the adult, the co-regulation between the parents. So it's a lot of it is co-regulation is a big piece of it, or connection. So it's really important. So breath, movement, connection, they all kind of intertwine together, and you can't really separate them, especially when you're working with younger children, but that doesn't mean so I've worked with children from infants all the way through teens with this program, or the framework for it is what I should say.
What did you begin to notice about how movement and breath affect both the parents and the child's nervous system?
What I think I over time, excuse me, over time and working with many different children, I typically, if they come to me and their bodies are tense and like just the tension that they hold in their bodies, but getting them to move and relax, and then doing, like, I'm going to just say, activities with them that are going to help them breathe. I have what's called a Hoberman spear, and I should have brought some of my, I didn't even think about that. But a Hoberman spear it's like a geometric dome, and you can open it and then close it. So I use that with the children to help them begin to connect with their breath. I also use a tool that's called Stretch Ease, and a Stretch Ease it's a stretchy band, kind of like, and it's not a weighted blanket, but the Stretch Ease actually um, can, like, the kids can wrap it around themselves. They can get inside of it. There's a multitude of ways that I use it, but probably using like a ball and having them. I have in my studio, I have like it's a table. I don't even call it a table, but it's something that kids can lay on, and rolling the ball across their back. So getting them to actually feel, like, what does it feel like? And then taking those skills home with the parents. And the parents are critical pieces of this, because if the parents don't buy into it, or they don't, or they don't do the work, then they're not going to see the results. And I think that for me to see the results and then have them be sustained and take them to school. But I can also say that I've had some children that have been able to regulate themselves, and then they've gone to school and the teachers will say, "You can't go to the calm down corner without me." So there's this like the understanding of, like, the nervous system, like, you got to go beneath behaviors to get to the nervous system. So the behaviors, the outward is the outward, like, expression of a child's, nervous system. So if they're upset, it's going to come out. When you look at how schools are doing things, there's not a lot. There is one school in Michigan, or school district in Michigan, that I'm aware of, that is using the framework from Dr. Lori Desautels, and it's Traverse City Schools, or one of the schools located up towards the Upper Peninsula. But she wrote a book called Brain Body Brilliance, which is the framework. She talks about, it starts with the adults. Adults have to lead, whether you're in a school, you're a caregiver, you're the parent. We have to lead through our nervous system to get to the children. But oftentimes what I see happen is, when I start with them, the parents are over here on the side. And then eventually I get them to come in, and then they understand that they've got to be a key part of the regulation.
Your work is deeply shaped by lived experience as well. How did your own trauma history influence the way you understand movement, safety, and the body's internal communication system?
I was, um, I'm a survivor of childhood trauma. And, all of our stories are so different. I mean, every single one of our stories are. And I like to say that I began working And I never really even realized that I was a survivor of childhood trauma until probably 20 years ago. I mean, it was just like I grew up in a home where there was, you know, it was just it was, that my parents didn't know the tools for regulation and those kind of things. So, how it shaped the work that I'm doing now was I saw young moms, I'm talking teen moms, who were coming to bring their children to drop off into early childhood centers, who were they were living traumas from poverty and other kinds of things. And it was then was when my eyes really began to open. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing myself and my mom is a part of that. So that led me on the journey of, talk therapy. And I did that for a very long time. And then probably about, I would say probably at least 8 years ago was when I began discovering the nervous system before it really became popular, and understanding what it was and how it worked. And then all of the stuff that I teach, I experienced myself through somatics, through movement. And I think that Pilates was a gateway for me because I had substantial, I'm going to use the word, I wore braces on my feet when I was young, and that delayed a lot of movement in my feet. And so when you practice Pilates, everything is there's a lot with feet and alignment, and you're barefoot. And it really opened my eyes, and I began to heal through my feet first. And I know that sounds odd, but it really began, and it just kind of has evolved. And I think that, like, even the work that I do with the kids, I start with like balance, and we can talk about some of these things, but it's just that when you have the awareness, we've got over 7,000 proprioceptors in our feet. That means nerve endings in our feet. So, but it made me take a look at myself and how did my traumas impact relationships? How did my trauma impact even work? How did it impact my relationship with my children? How did it impact just in general, my whole life? And and they began, there was themes that came up out of that. And so when I started the somatic work of it, and I started releasing it through my body, that's where I was like, oh my gosh. And I had to feel it. I had to feel the resiliency of, because I've always been, Dr. Sarah, somebody who's always taking care of myself. Well, I eat healthy, I go to the gym, and I should be okay. And I needed more. My body needed more, and it was crying out for it. And I had to listen, and I had to stop. Oh, there was yoga first, and then there was Pilates. And yoga was good for a while, but Pilates was really the gateway for me that opened me. And then from there, it's just kind of evolved.
What changed when you stopped asking the body to perform and started asking it to feel safe?
That was really hard for me because, it was like you have, like, I'm just going to say, like in Pilates, it's, this is the way we do want to do things. And so I had to get out of my head. It's not a Pilates perfect. It's a Pilates practice. And it's just releasing and understanding, even like for me, and I'll talk about it in a second, but I had breast cancer. And so like even lifting, I'll move my arm. So even lifting my arm up, I never could go full extension until I started doing other things, but it was releasing that scar tissue and releasing other things that really began. So I think that even now, how I teach, I want people to feel their bodies. And it's really important for me to teach to the person in front of me, but for myself, just understanding and listening. Today needs to be a meditation day, or today needs to be a weightlifting. Even right now, these are things that I tap into every single day through journaling and sitting quietly and just understanding, what is my body asking of me today? So, to go back to your question, it took me a long time to get to that point. It took me a long time. to work through the tightness in my body and where I held it. And for me, it was like shoulders and hips, like classical places that people hold their traumas. So does
And,
that
in society, I feel like we're not really developed, right? Co-developed to pay attention to our bodies. Our bodies
exactly?
are always talking to us. All of the experiences that we have, our thoughts, our emotions, our sensations, those are all signals that can be used as tools to help us grow, to help us learn, to help us expand.
The
But
right
we're not really like taught that. I feel like that should come before history and algebra and right?
but yeah, exactly. But what's really interesting is, I was numb from the inside out and I had to learn the language of my body. And I had to learn that, you know, what was that? Like, I'm just going to use the word like in this, like in my chest, it just felt like there was this knot. And once I started softening around it, it started to become open. And it's like, I felt like I was like, you know, like before my shoulders were more rounded. And then as I began to, have words and identify the words with the emotions or the sensations. And that's where I find that I still, when I work with my clients, those are still things like people will say, I'm okay. Well, really, what is okay? But if they don't have another word beyond okay, then that's where, I don't pester them to go deeper. My job is to work with their bodies. They go to a therapist and that's the therapist job. So I keep it very professional. And if they, give me anyways, but it's the sensations, and I think it's feeling those sensations of, you know, what what does it feel like? What does a wound, I mean, the tension and things like that, what are the words? What does it mean? What does that mean in your body? And so oftentimes, but yes, sensations is huge.
With more than 35 years in early childhood education, you've had a front row seat to how children communicate through their bodies. What do you notice children expressing physically that adults often overlook or misunderstand?
Their behavior, and they can have outbursts like a meltdown, big emotions. They might shut down. I mean, they're no different than adults, but they don't have the words to communicate what's really going on. And I'm going to use the word underneath that behavior. So you got to dig deep to go under the behavior. What's causing them to react like that? And so oftentimes, I'm going to just use the word caregivers, and that could encompass a lot of people. But I think that when we began to open our eyes and look at like how they're dysregulated, and that dysregulation, that whole fight, flight, or freeze, if they're shutting down, they're freezing. What's happening to them? Are they going to sleep? Are they not eating? Are they hyper vigilant? Are they hyper? What is their behavior like? And their body is asking for, like, if they're really high strung, I usually will give them like activities that are going to help them. Proprioception. So heavy work to get them to start to, like they can feel it and they can start to regulate. And those are things that it's the other things that are just like how they walk. Like, are there delays? And my approach to this too, Dr. Sarah, is like looking at like, are they delayed in school? How does their trauma impact their breathing? How does it impact their posture? How does it impact their core strength? Because if you are not strong in your core, you haven't developed. Like, if they've missed a developmental milestone, it's going to have a bearing on how they move, how they write, how they respond. Um, I'm just going to use, so if a child has issues holding a pen and they can't get that pincer grasp, a lot of times people want to go, let's give them activities to do to develop their pincer muscles. Reality, they really need to go back to the core and teach the kids how to sit up, how to like rest their arm on the table. So I look at developmentally, where are they on so many different levels. But to answer you, go back to your question, because I feel like I've done a little bit around there, is like a lot of times we, meaning parents, or even we can be oblivious to what's going on with the kids, because a lot of times the kids are mimicking the parents' behavior.
Can parents begin listening differently to what children's nervous systems are asking for?
It starts with the parents and understanding that we have a role. And a lot of and people might not want to hear what I have to say about that, but it really begins with us, whether any kind of a caregiver. It could be a parent, grandparent, a teacher, an aide in the classroom. It could be an aunt or an uncle. So if we begin to check ourselves and respond differently, they're going to see a difference in their child. Just even something as simple as breathing and understand, like just take a breath, pause. And if you are somebody who raises your voice, maybe you respond differently to the child in a lower tone of voice. I think that when we begin, because children are co regulating with adults, meaning it's like mirror neurons. So what I mean by that is, essentially a child is going to behave like a parent or a guardian or whatever. And you're going to see those kinds of things.
You've also lived through breast cancer and have been cancer free for 19 years. Congratulations
Thank you.
on that. Without sharing anything that feels too personal, how did that experience deepen your trust in the body's ability to heal? How did it reshape your relationship with your body?
That's a very good question. And I think I'm no different than a lot of other um, breast cancer survivors. I was very fortunate. I was stage 1 when they found it. And so um, I mean, we all have a treatment. My journey for my treatment was 5 years long. But prior to having breast cancer, I think that I was shocked because I've always taken, and this is me, I'm going to just say, I always took care of myself. But how could I have cancer? And so then I kept saying, and this was long before there were studies that showed that when you're in high stress, toxic relationships, that can be a contributing factor to cancer. It can be, in which I was at that particular point. And so then it put me on this quest of healing, but it also made me realize behaviors that I was doing, like people pleasing. Let's see, people pleasing, like I didn't have a really good body image at that point, and I was probably thinner than I needed to be. But I think that it really began, like, that's where I feel like my healing began on different levels. But the numbing pieces of it, that's where I noticed, like I couldn't feel anything from my neck down emotionally, is what I should say. So, how did it shape where I am today? It's made me realize that those behaviors that I was doing were coming from like lived experiences growing up, even in being in a relationship with somebody who also had his own issues. But I think that as time has gone on, it's made me be very grateful that I had cancer. And I know that may sound odd to some people, but it opened my eyes in ways that began helping me heal on a journey that I'm grateful that I've never had cancer, never had breast cancer again. So that's a really big aspect of it. And I think that stepping back and looking at it where I was then and where I am now, I definitely have more confidence. My body awareness and my body, like I'm just going to say my body image, you know, here I am. I'm a survivor, and I exercise and take care of myself and I eat well and I advocate. And I've worked with other breast cancer survivors over the years, through Pilates.
You've written the phrase, the body can heal itself. For people who feel stuck, dysregulated, or disconnected, what does that mean?
The body can heal itself if we give it a chance. Meaning, and these are questions, and I do not mean these to offend anyone. So I'm going to say that beforehand. But when we go to the regular doctor and they want to give us pharmaceuticals to medication for this and a medication for that. And when for me, I was like beginning to look at, like, even 20 years ago or 19 years ago when I had cancer, I would not do chemo. So I found an alternative, which was I didn't do chemo because I knew it was going to make me sicker. So I did Lupron injections. So I had chemo, I had surgery, radiation, and then I took injections that kept me from having a menstrual cycle. So, I mean, they're all different, but that's how I felt like in the body keeps the score or the body begins to heal itself. If you listen and you add in movement, there's so many things that could help people like when they begin to listen. Pilates and yoga are not for everybody. So maybe it means just sitting and going outside and putting your bare feet in the grass when there's not snow and doing like the healing part of it. If you allow your body to begin to heal, it's going to give you guidance from food cravings that you need or don't need to, healing your stomach, your gut, your microbiome in your stomach. So I
What
think
would
that
you want them to understand about hope, pacing, and the learnability of regulation?
that with consistency, there's hope. So, meaning that you're going to choose to do something to help you with resiliency. So, through resiliency, learning to breathe, learning to understand what's going on within your body, connecting to your body, because oftentimes we're so disconnected from our bodies that you have to come home to your body. And when I say come home, like spend time with yourself and don't worry about people pleasing or taking care of everybody else. Take care of yourself. And the hope pieces of it I think are, it's there. More and more people are beginning to understand like the work that you're doing, Dr. Sarah, and the work that I'm doing is, these are skills that you can change. It changes people around you. Once you become regulated and it's like a ripple effect. You're regulated. So the people that you talk to and it wears on other people. I don't want to say it's a ripple effect. I mean, it's definitely had an impact on myself, with my husband, and even other people. Sometimes it's hard because you're changing. I mean, when you're looking at healing and resiliency and hope, it changes you as a person. So, but it changes you, but it's coming to like the authentic person that's underneath that because so many of us, unfortunately, wear masks.
So, I would love to extend the listener invitation to Tami. So, for all of our listeners out there, we used to call it a listener challenge, but I like the energy of listener invitation more. So, Tammy, for this week's listener invitation, can you offer a simple, practical practice that they can try every day over the next week?
Absolutely, Dr. Sarah. So, first thing I'd like you to do, if you're sitting in a chair, um, to place both feet on the floor. If you can do it with no shoes on, that would be preferable. So your feet are grounded on the floor. And I want you to just allow yourself to maybe shift your weight in whatever you're sitting on. So it could be a couch, it could be a chair, whatever you're sitting on. And just allow yourself, let your hands rest on the tops of your thighs. And before we go to our feet, let's take a breath in. And then just gently let it go. One more time, take a breath in. Gently let it go. Now close your eyes and I want you to allow your feet, pick your toes up, whatever it feels like for you, just picking your toes up off the floor and then laying them down. Now, the next time you place them down, envision that your toes are like roots and they're grounding you down into the earth and you're just moving into the soil. Maybe you even like are still massaging your feet into the surface that your feet are on right now. But just allow yourself to let your feet open wide, meaning your toes, because oftentimes our feet are scrunched into shoes. So allow yourself. Maybe you even need to lift through your heels, lift your toes, come back to those toes. Let them grow roots sinking down into the earth. Reach down, down, down into the earth and grab some of that rich soil and massage it with your feet. And then just go ahead and just let your feet relax on the floor. Take another breath in and notice how your feet are feeling. Maybe even your legs. Did they get a little softer? Meaning if your legs were tight, did they soften up a little bit? And over time, just moving your feet and taking care of our feet is just so critical for self care. Thank you for listening and thank you for the opportunity to guide them through the small practice.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. As we begin to close, what do you hope listeners will walk away carrying after hearing both your story and your work?
Hope would be that if you're in a place where you feel stuck, there are so many tools that can help you. They don't have to cost anything. I mean, there's so many things that you can begin to make changes within yourself, even if it's just a small change, but and it's sustained over time. That's why when Dr. Sarah asked us to do like something for 7 days, that there is hope. And there's so much more awareness around our body and the nervous system. And there's so much talk about it. Um, but you have to begin by just welcoming yourself home. Like, let yourself come back to yourself. Be patient with yourself. You didn't get this way overnight, and sometimes it takes hard work. If it's there and you want, seek out somebody to help you with the process. I think that's always really important as well.
Thank you for sharing that. And I forgot to mention at the beginning, but this is going to be Tammy's part of our Michigan Spotlight series because she is local. She's in Grand Blanc, Michigan, so a little north of Ann Arbor, I do believe. Tammy, thank you for bringing your warmth, your wisdom, and your deeply embodied understanding of healing into this space. Your work is a powerful reminder that regulation is learnable and that the body holds incredible intelligence. Before we close, I want to name this. I never leave these conversations unchanged. There's always something I'm taking with me, something I'll reflect on, and something I'll continue to integrate after we stop recording. And if this episode resonated with you, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it. That's how these conversations travel. That's how they reach the people who need to hear them the most. For our listeners, if today's conversation stirred something in you, move gently with it. The body can heal, safety can be learned, and you are becoming. Until next time, this is Dr. Sarah, and this is Neuroalchemy. Bye for now.